with the exception of the province of Bahia. I'll read something about Bahia, then I'll answer the question we asked earlier. How were we able to maintain that staying power, regardless of the fact that our people were taken away, far away from home? See, I can see this, your French. This is nice. This is so lovely. Ushe, Ushe, God bless you. All right, let me continue reading. In spite of the considerable increase in Yoruba arrivals, Yoruba slaves continued to be minorities among African slaves in most parts of the country, with the exception of the province of Bahia. In the province of Bahia, the Yoruba became the largest group of arriving slaves from about 1800 because Bahian slave carriers came to concentrate much of their traffic on the ports of the Yoruba coast. It has been estimated that a total of 439,000 Yoruba slaves were taken to Bahia from about 1675 to about 1850. Thanks so much for the gifts. Thanks a lot, Vicky. And that about 292,000 of these were taken there during the 50 years, 1800 to 1850. The total Yoruba import of 439,000 represented about 40% of all African slaves received by Bahia throughout the era of Atlantic slavery. So we know from this that a lot of Yoruba people were in Bahia. They're considered like the majority in that place. But even then, they were not necessarily the majority when you look at the composition of all the slaves that were taken to the Americas. So let's answer some of the questions that we asked earlier. What made them stay so long? So number one, I'm going to read from Omboro. So I made some notes. I'll be reading and going back and forth. What page is this? 3. Okay, so I'm going to read page 369 from the book I mentioned earlier. And the reason I'm having this conversation and asking this question is so maybe we can learn from it and let it inspire us one way or another. So the first thing that you notice is that they were guided by a sense of association and combination for the common good. So let me read where that is from. Oh dear. One second, please. All right. So this one. Okay, so I'm reading a history of the Yoruba people. Let me just read this one. All right. They were guided in marked degree by the sense of association. Where is that from? It might be no number. I'm using two devices, so I'm trying to find the word. Let me just keep reading. They were guided in marked degree by the sense of association. The principle of combination for the common weal has been fully sustained wherever they have settled in any numbers. In fact, the whole Yoruba race may be said to form a sort of social league for mutual support and protection. One second. Okay, I found it. Eshego. All right, this is going to be nice. Let me just take it a little. All right. So I'm reading 369, page 369 of the History of Yoruba Peoples by Stephen Baji Akintoye. Of the contributions of the cultural heritage of the Yoruba people to these processes, a fair amount is known today, and the overall assessment seems to be that the cultural impact of Yoruba people on the evolution of African American or Creole cultures was greater than the numbers of the Yoruba slaves could justify. So the point is that there are 9% of the entire population of African slaves taken into the New World. However, they seem to have so much influence, and the influence seems to be greater than the number. So what we're doing right now is just to ask, why did they have such influence, and what can we pick from it? So give me 1 second. Let me just rearrange this table so that it looks a bit better than... So I don't like all these spaces. Makes me feel somehow. Perfect. All right. We're not just called the Jebu people Jebu from. I mean, he's making that up. Of course, we know it's a joke. So if your name sounds, it's like if you call the Jebu people Jebu side, it's like saying Edo people in Japan are from Benin. It's the same. It's the same thought process and it makes no sense. But let's go back into this. The overall assessment seems to be that the cultural impact of the Yoruba people on the evolution of African American or Creole cultures was greater than the numbers of the Yoruba slaves could justify. And so somebody did a recent study. The name of the person is David Eltis. I'm going to read what the person discovered. It says here, within coerced African migration, the Yoruba were among the latest to arrive. When they say coerced, they're talking about the slaves, the people that were taken forcefully from Africa to the New World. It means those were taken from Africa to the New World. So it says, within coerced African migration, the Yoruba were among the latest to arrive, but were neither the most numerous nor the least scattered over the Americas. Reasonably precise estimates for other groups will eventually become available, but it is probable that Igbo and some West Central African peoples were larger and more heavily concentrated than the Yoruba. The Igbo in parts of British Caribbean and some of what have been termed Congo groups in southeast Brazil. Yet, the impact of the Yoruba speakers on Creole societies that emerged in many parts of the Americas appears to modern scholars to have been strong, and in the light of the evidence presented here, out of proportion to the relative size of Yoruba arrivals. What they are saying is this: there were more Igbo slaves. There were more slaves taken from Congo. So the question is, if you have this small population, how come they have such influence that it's like the other ones that are so many, they don't have that kind of influence on the people? So this goes to their own identity that was formed before they were taken as slaves. And we're going to get to it. And why are we doing this? Because Nigeria has a way of making you think we are all the same. And I've been saying this over and over again. And I've said this again and again, that this is not about Ekabo. This is not about, we're not number 3. Jay, no, I don't think you're getting it. That was in comparison with those two groups. That doesn't mean that it was looking at all the people that went. And that's not even the point. If you have 9% of 100 and you have greater influence than every other person, your numbers do not account for your influence. And that's the point. Oh, that's fine, Jay. That's okay. But that's not even the point. The point is not the number it's not how many. It's like, if you say you are the third, let's assume that the first person is, out of 100, the first person is 50. The second person is 30. The third person is 9. Just because you are the third in that sense still doesn't change the fact that your number is little compared to the influence you're exerting. So it's not so much about the numbers, like, oh, we were like the third population. The point is that even if you were the third, you were very small compared to the first and second. I hope that answers it. So we may be the third, but you're right, we're 9% of the entire population. So 9% is actually very small. But then the question is not even so much about the number, but about the influence. So let me just keep reading. Oh boy. Okay, I'll see it. So it's saying that you have the Igbos there, who are quite many. You have the people who are like, they call the Congo groups, but then somehow these Yoruba people have so much influence. So this is what he says. This is a Banja Akintoye now. In comparison, that is, with other African groups, the Yoruba contributed considerably more to Creole or African American civilization in oral traditions, especially as expressed in songs, religious rituals, stories, proverbs, and so on, as well as in various modes of family and societal structures. And here is the answer to the question. The main explanation for this is to be found in the strength of the civilization from which the Yoruba of the New World were extracted and taken away into slavery. I'm going to read that part again. Why did they have more influence than other groups? There are many other answers, but the first one we're seeing here is that the main explanation for the kind of influence they had, which is not commensurate with the numbers they had was that they saw that in the strength of the civilization from which the Yoruba of the New World were extracted and taken away into slavery. In other words, its strong family and settlement traditions, its urban orientation, its social and associational traditions, its innumerable cooperative, collaborative, and support institutions, its highly developed artistic culture, as expressed in the visual arts, folklore, and its strong religion. And so the view of the Yoruba voiced by Louis Antoine Aimé, I don't know, de Vertu, is French, so pardon me. The person's view in 1858 is similar to views expressed by many other foreign observers in that century. And this is what the Louis Observer wrote. He says, Yoruba people were guided in marked degree by the sense of association. The principle of combination for the common will has been fully sustained wherever they have settled in any numbers. In fact, the whole Yoruba race may be said to form a sort of social league for mutual support and protection. So there are other explanations, but let's just stay with this first one first. So two things you see here. Number one is the fact that they were coming from a particular civilization that they did not jettison, even though they were now taken as slaves into another part of the world. And what does that mean for us today? Yes, it means that we should celebrate them, but it means we should also tap into what we have, because one of the main things that helped them to stay true to their culture and their identity was the fact that they did not drop who they were just because they were now in diaspora. The same thing for those of us who, for instance, are not in Nigeria, you're not in Yoruba land, you're all over the place, you're in the UK, you're in the US, you're in Europe, wherever you may be, that the lesson to pick from this is to not jettison who we are just because we're in a foreign land. Or some people who are even in Nigeria themselves, they have this thing where it's like they're trying to become Americans while they're here. Let me tell you one very funny thing. Well, I don't know if it's funny, but I think it irks me, to be honest. When you listen to Nigerian radio and you hear people who, in most cases, the grammar is off, but the American accent is on lockdown. It's like everybody's trying to be American, even if they're not really learning the language. They'll drive me. But the point here is that regardless of where you are, you don't just, drop who you are. Whether because Nigeria wants you to create a new Nigerian identity, which is a pipe dream, or you feel in some ways threatened, or maybe even feel that you're overwhelmed by another culture. So think about this. The lesson to learn from these guys was that they were 9% of the entire African population, but they did not stop who they were, even though they were in foreign space. And somebody now said, one of the things you also noticed was that they had this mutual support. They collaborated, they worked with each other. And that made them different from other groups. And I'll tell you something about many other groups at that time. I will not mention the exact group. One of the things that you notice about that particular group was individualism. People were very individualistic. And even till today, it's still something you see in that particular culture. And that's why I said that in order to understand Nigeria, just know that you're dealing with different nations and different cultures. It makes everything a lot easier. There are people who celebrate individuality. Yoruba people are not like that. Again, when we discuss cultures, we're not saying one is good, one is better than the other. Actually, one is better than the other, let's not lie. But we're not necessarily saying that this one is bad. We're just saying that there are people who are more individualistic. Now, those kind of people will find it very difficult to transmit cultural values and traditions among them, to preserve it amongst themselves and to transmit it to the coming generation. Just to say that a lot of us are exposed to many kind of culture, to all kinds of cultures these days, especially European culture, which is by and large quite individualistic, to be honest. But we have to remember that one of the things that keeps Yoruba culture alive is that mutual support, is that cooperative element, is that idea of working together, like what we call communalism, where you're working within a community. So we're not just Yoruba sọ pé àrìnpápọ̀ kìíní kan, ta ló mọ òwe yẹn? Àrìnpápọ̀ ọmọ ejò or something. I think it's àrìnpápọ̀ ọmọ ejò. Because they didn't work together, they become easy prey, right? So because the snakes were not working together. This is the proverb, by the way. I want to tell you the proverbs that particular proverb in English. Because the snakes didn't work together, they become easy prey, right? So when people work together like that, they're able to preserve what matters to them and also able to transmit it to another group, e.g., the coming generation. So this again is the view of foreigners looking at the Yoruba people who were slaves. Anìkanrin ọmọ ejò ló ń mọ́bọ̀ àyìnpapọ̀ ọmọ ejò ló ń kóyà jẹ ọmọ ejò rárá o ìráyè kárìnpapọ̀ ní yíyẹ níyẹ ìyẹn náà wà ń bẹ̀bọ̀ ó ní ìkọ̀kọ̀ tí mo wá ànìkanrin ló ń jọmọ ejì níyà gbogbo yín kàn fún mi ní deeper things ní ṣá ẹ ṣé gan, but I'm sure you get the gist. So the point really is that we have to be careful that yes, we are learning a lot of things from other cultures. We're exposed to all kinds of cultures these days, whether because you've traveled or because you're aspiring to a particular kind of lifestyle. But we have to be very careful not to lose ourselves in that. And I'm saying this because one of the things you hear these days, especially on social media, is people say things like "Àìrìn àpapà ọmọ ejò ló ń ṣekú pa wọ́n." Àìrìn papọ̀ ọmọ ejò. Ṣóòótọ́ ni ṣá? But I think this is the closest to what I was looking for. I call one ejò ní ṣekú pa wọ́n. Yes. I say it in English. I'm glad you're able to say it in Yoruba. Àìrìn papọ̀ ọmọ ejò ló ń ṣekú pa wọ́n. Yeah. Because they're not working together or walking together, they become easy prey, basically. So I was saying that there's a particular musician, Ashake. Ashake is very loud about his Yorubaness in his songs, in his lyrics, and all of that. And then certain people were on social media to say, why can't he just speak English so that we can understand what he's saying? Then there's another guy who is a comedian who would speak Yoruba regardless, and then they also said the same thing to him. What kind of thing is this? Can you not just speak English so all of us would understand? Now, that person tries to fit in this day. I mean, he eventually went back to his original calling, but he tried to fit in at the point, and then his views were dropping. And the people who told you to speak English, they'll just move on to something else. And the funny thing is that Ashake and his Yoruba eventually got a Grammy nomination. But those people who are saying speak English, you can't see anybody from their space get that high. So the point is, you've got to be very smart about your identity, where you're not, this is the second thing, by the way, where you're not threatened or bullied by other people to drop what makes you unique, just so you can satisfy their own cravings. Because at the end of the day, the Yoruba populace, right, all across the world alone can actually take care of you in terms of support your art. Thank you, Awori Saxon. So hold on to your authenticity. If, for instance, and I thought about this even while I was doing all these things, because Awori Saxon knows me outside this place. We do things that are, personally, I do things that are more international, especially with my faith and all of those things. When you do Yoruba, it makes it look as if you're cutting the whole world to just Yoruba. Instead of you to focus on the world, you're focusing on Yoruba. But the point is that focusing on Yoruba is actually how you reach the world. But while you're trying to run around, trying to reach the world and trying to pander to their whims and caprices, you lose yourself in that process. So the uniqueness that you require to be able to be acceptable on the global stage, on a larger space, on a larger scale, you've lost it while you're trying to pander to some clowns in Nigeria. So it's important for us not to, get to that point where you're like, I want them to accept me. They won't even accept you, because the only thing that makes you unique is the son. So
Sweet.
Yeah, please go on. Yes.
Let me just say something on that proverb you were using and why it's such an important proverb. The full saying is àìrìn papọ̀ ọmọ ejò ní ṣekú pa wọ́n, torí tí ọká bá ṣíwájú tí ṣèbé bá tẹ̀lé ọmọ èèyàn wo ló máa dojúkọ wọ́n. That's the full extent of the saying.
Can you say it again? No, just say it again because of our talent. Àìrìn papọ̀ ọmọ ejò ló ń
ṣekú pa wọ́n, torí tí ọká bá ṣíwájú tí ṣèbé bá tẹ̀lé ọmọ èèyàn wo ló máa dojúkọ wọ́n. So the idea is, it is easy to kill one snail, but if several snails move together, so if the cobra leads and the python follows, which man would dare them? That's it in English. So if you think about it, the cobra is a spitting snake. The python is a snake. Is a snake that suffocates. So
Yeah.
it's even in their strengths. But the one that bites, that has a poisonous bite, tí ẹ bá kọ́kọ́ ṣíwájú tó kọ́kọ́ bite ẹ, tí tó ń suffocate wá tẹ̀lé, ṣé ẹ̀ ní sá padà? Gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ fẹ́ lẹ́ fẹ́ pé ejò, ṣé ẹ̀ ní sá? So that's the import of that saying, both in terms of strength of numbers and diversity of shall I call it diversity of skills, so to say.
Yeah.
I think PFA has something to add to it.
One second.
Yeah,
okay. I just want to say something, like, and I want to tie it to the meeting we had, the call we had yesterday on Telegram. A lot of you didn't make it. I think a lot of people don't know how to use Telegram, but we're going to have that meeting again scheduled for some other time. But I'm also when it comes to making things work within our space, the only thing that individuals do a lot in Nigeria is to sharp everybody. But if we put our strengths together, right, we will be able to actually accomplish a lot more stuff. And what these people did basically was to put their strengths together and live as a community and build as a community and do things together. Let me tell you one thing I read in a particular book about the history of Yorùbá, that back in the day, Tomafe Conley, ṣàkíyèsí pé tó bá ń kanlé nílẹ̀ Yorùbá ń sìn àbí tó bá ń ṣe decking, tó bá ń ṣe decking àbí tó bá ń kanlé, wọ́n máa ń pín oúnjẹ. Ṣé notice wọ́n máa ń pín oúnjẹ, àwọn máa fáwọn àwọn ará àdúgbò lóúnjẹ, àbáyọ̀ máa jẹun. I want to make sure people are listening. In the comment section, have you experienced it before? Have you eaten? Pé wọ́n ṣe decking, wọ́n á fún yín lóúnjẹ, wá jẹ ń bẹ̀. Ṣé kí ní ẹ̀bí tó ti wá ní wípé látijọ́ tó bá ti fẹ́ kanlé, gbogbo àdúgbò ló máa bẹ kanlé ẹ̀. Nǹkan tí wàá ṣe ni pé wàá gbóúnjẹ tán máa jẹ sílẹ̀. So the culture we have today is that anytime tó bá ti ń kanlé, ọdún àdúgbò kan ló máa kanlé o, but tó máa fún everybody lóúnjẹ. But oúnjẹ yẹn bí tó ti wá gangan ni pé yes, like Caro. It's just the same thing with oko náà gbà mí. Tẹ́ pé àwọn ará àdúgbò máa bẹ kọbì, wọ́n á bẹ ṣe ilẹ̀, ṣùgbọ́n you feed them. So látijọ́ tó wá fẹ́ kanlé, wọ́n á gbárùpọ̀ ni, wọ́n á jọ ṣe pọ̀, wọ́n á pawọ́pọ̀, wọ́n á jọ kọ. Tó bá ti kan ẹlòmíràn tó fẹ́ kan tètè wá lọ bá kan, ó máa fún àwọn lóúnjẹ. Ní ìsinyìí àkàn jẹun yẹn ni àrídì mọ ibi tó ti wá, bọ̀ ibi tó ti wá gangan ni pé wọ́n ń ṣe pọ̀. It makes it easier to make progress that way than to try to do everything on your own. So we still have the tradition with us today from decking, when we want to deck our houses or when we want to roof the house. But yeah, once I'm saying around the way, I want to my bedroom, my dad, Nigeria Babe, and then PFA.
Okay, so let me start with the response to Aro and Owe. So Aro is like a guild. Because you notice that àwọn Yorùbá máa ń ṣe ẹgbẹ́ gan. Yeah, pé ẹgbẹ́ ilé ẹgbẹ́ yẹn is actually something from our forebears. So you have ẹgbẹ́ oníkìníkan, ẹgbẹ́ oníkìníkan, ẹgbẹ́ oníkìníkan, and that was their way of raising capital, so to say. So you see a group of young men who are together of the same age range that cannot afford slaves or afford to pay for labor. So what they would do is when it is time for clearing before harvest season, before planting season. Before planting season. So they will go to someone's farm and contribute their labor and help that person clear their farm for planting season. And then what would happen is that the only thing that person would provide would be food that they would eat for the day. So that person would not have to pay them any money or anything. So, and then the same thing is repeated when the person is harvesting, when it's harvesting season. That's what it means. So, and then they will repeat that among themselves as members. Yeah. So they collectively pull together their labor in order to kind of ensure that each one gets like this huge amount of It's their way of,
Harvest.
Giving themselves capital. Because obviously, if a person is able to plant a huge amount of, I don't know, whatever, and by the time that person sells, it's much bigger than tó bá yẹ pé òun fúnra rẹ̀ ló ṣe àbí tó bá yẹ pé ó fẹ́ lọ san owó láti ṣe. That is aro. Now, ọ̀wẹ̀. The difference between aro and ọ̀wẹ̀ is that with ọ̀wẹ̀, it is people who are trying to raise personal capital for themselves. Yeah? So, for example, I don't have money and I want to become a cassava farmer, right? I will go and apprentice myself under a cassava farmer. Yeah? So what will now happen is that cassava farmer, whenever it is time for him to plant, or any of the members of his guild, I will follow them. It will be part of me. It will be part of my apprenticeship. And what will now happen is that when I now decide that I want to, or be freedom, I be whenever, between me and my master, we decide that it is time for me to be independent, what would happen is that the Oga, because I have served him, would dip his hands into his pocket and give me like a starting capital. So a starting capital from the I don't want to call it master, from the teacher to the apprentice is given. That's the difference between, aro and owe. Yeah. So in a sense, the idea is telling us that tí èèyàn kan bá ní strength láti ṣe nǹkan kan, there's nothing wrong. Yes, yeah. So there's nothing wrong with look around people of your age mates, so that there won't be issues of pé bóyá mo jù ẹ́ lọ jù mí lọ àbó orí mi fi mo ìyẹn ló ṣe jẹ́ pé they do it by age mates. In fact, and you will see that the Ijebus have maintained that culture with their regberegbes. So if you know any Ijebu person, they will tell you somebody who belongs to this particular regberegbe cannot join another one of another age range. They always ensure that one age bracket, no one having share. And if you're a member of one age group, they will not let you join an older age group or a younger age group to maintain this sort of thing. And this will be one of the reasons why we sort of always look at the Jebus and say, oh yeah, they're very united. They're able to present a common front. They do business together. They do this, they do that. It's because they've capital. Yeah. So they've maintained that culture of guilds, guild formations, and using it where useful to kind of raise themselves, can I say financially, or, with respect to capital or economically. Yeah. So go for it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. PFA, please go on, then I'll speak later.
Right. Nǹkan kan mú tiẹ̀ bá wá sókè tẹ́lẹ̀ bọ̀ àti dé àwọn òbí kan. Ṣẹ́rí so ọ̀wẹ̀ àti àáró, I think the ohun yẹn gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́ àáró, do, mi, mi, àáró. So àáró ni. Ó máa ń ṣẹlẹ̀ láàrin àwọn ọlọ́dẹ náà. Fún bí àpẹẹrẹ, tọ́lọ́dẹ kan tó bá nínáwó ṣe, bóyá ó fẹ́ fọmọ fọ́kọ àbí nǹkan kan. So gbogbo àwọn tó ń jọ jẹ́ ọmọ ẹgbẹ́ ọdẹ, wọ́n á lọ sóko, wọ́n á lọ ṣọdẹ, wọ́n á pa ẹran tó pọ̀. Wọ́n wá ní èyí tó fi jẹ́ pé tán bá kàn ń ṣe normal ọdẹ, bọ́n ṣe máa ń ṣe tẹ́lẹ̀, tán máa pa, tán máa pín. Wọn ò ní pa kán pín, kò ní jápa pín. Wọ́n máa kó lọ sílé ẹni tán torí ẹ̀ jáde. Tó bá tún di ká ní oṣù méjì, oṣù mẹ́ta, ẹlòmíì náà tó wà nínú ẹgbẹ́ wọn tán jọ lọ ṣe ọdẹ lágbájá, wọ́n á tún jọ lọ, wọ́n á tún jọ ṣọdẹ, wọ́n á tún wọ́n á pako fún ìyẹn náà, wọn ò ní pa alápapín. So òun ni mi wá mọ̀ bóyá àwọn ọdẹ tiẹ̀ lórúkọ kan tó ń pe tí wọ́n bọ̀ ní iṣẹ́ àgbẹ̀. In fact, ìdí iṣẹ́ àgbẹ̀ ní kíní ẹ̀ common sí jù. Wọ́n ní wọ́n ń roko àáró, wọ́n ní wọ́n ń lọ sóko àáró. So ọ̀wẹ̀ bí Àwórì Saxon ṣe explain ẹ̀, ìyẹn tiẹ̀ jẹ́ kó yé wa tá bá rò jinlẹ̀ wípé serve master tí àwọn kan máa ń sọ pé àwọn làwọn ní. ká tó ṣòòṣà láti ń ṣòòṣà àwa náà ní bá a ṣe ń ṣe nǹkan kó tó di pé
PFA kí ẹ pé àwa náà ní
báwa ṣe ń ṣe nǹkan
báwa ṣe ń ṣe nǹkan tiwa ni ìtàwọn ṣe yìí ó dá o ṣùgbọ́n ìtàn ṣe yìí ẹ this is part of the fallout civil war lélẹ́yìí o.
èmi ò tẹ́ mọ̀
recent history
mi mọ̀
recent history ní fáwọn and it's a very good thing but ancient history ní fáwa wà kí n lanu sọ̀rọ̀ ń pa nǹkan tá à ń ṣe ó máa fẹ́ dàbí pé bẹ́ẹ̀ pé àwa ń kọ́pì ẹni tó ṣe pé ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ bẹ̀rẹ̀ lánàá àwa dẹ̀ ti ń ṣe tipẹ́tipẹ́ látàyébáyé.
Thank you.
ẹ máa bọ̀rọ̀ lọ.
so nǹkan tó gbé mi wókè òun ni ọ̀rọ̀ àìrìnpọ̀ ní jọmọejò ń yà yẹn ó mú mi rántí ohun kan tá a máa fi ń ṣeré ọ̀jẹ̀ nílé ìyá mi eléégún ni wọ́n àdúgbò ìyá mi mo dẹ̀ gbé tí mo dàgbà sí so mo gbó lóhùn bí ọ̀jẹ̀ díẹ̀ so a máa ń ṣeré kan a ní ẹ̀bá jẹ́ a máa kọ̀wọ́ rìn lọ àìrìnpọ̀ ejò níjọmọ ejò níyà òun ni òwe tí Àwórì Saxon tán bá wa yànnàná ẹ̀ lẹ́ẹ̀kan yẹn pé ẹ jẹ́ ká máa kọ̀wọ́ rìn lọ torí pé àìrìnpọ̀ ejò òun ló ń jọmọ ejò ń yà tọ́ka bá síwájú tí ṣèbé tẹ̀lé tí paramọ́lẹ̀ ń bọ̀ lẹ́yìn tólúfà wá jókòó lẹ́yìn gbogbo wọn ìyálà ìyáta náà bí i dá tó fẹ́ dojú ìjà kọ ọmọ ejò so orin bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe dé orí òwe yẹn mo kàn rántí lára àwọn ẹni tó bá jọmọ eléégún tó ń ṣe ń kọ́ ní bá a ṣe ń kéwì bá a ṣe ń ṣe gbábà lára àwọn first set of ewì tó máa kọ́kọ́ kí ni anégún mi ń bẹ lọ́kẹ́ kò ṣà mi ń bẹ lájà alẹ̀ ẹ bá jẹ́ a máa kọ̀wọ́ rìn lọ àìrìnpọ̀ ejò níjọmọ ejò níyà so kí náà ti pè yẹn mo fẹ́ wá sọ tá a tún fi dé ibi àárò and all that. Thank you very much.
ọmọ bàbá eléégún wẹ́dọ̀. So actually, I think there's a particular point I want to make. So it's not necessarily just about farmers, even though we always use farming to explain it. It cuts across, let me put it this way, it cuts across anything, any activity that is considered capital intensive in Yorùbá land. So even nígbà ìwáṣẹ̀, nígbà tí òun jẹ́ ṣe pé wọ́n fẹ́ kanlé tí èèyàn bá kọ́lé tí ọ̀dọ́mọkùnrin bá dàgbà tó bá kọ́kọ́ kọ́ ilé tiẹ̀ tó bá wá fẹ́ ṣe òrùlé sí àti ṣe òrùlé sílé kò ń ṣe iṣẹ́ tí ẹnìkan lè dá tẹ́nìkan bá dá ṣe á ṣe tí á pẹ́. So again, it's something else that is either labor or capital intensive. So they will pull the labor of their age mates and use it to complete that task quickly and without the same amount of capital, shall I say, capital strain on the individual. And then, of course, because the individual involved would now have to provide food as a thank you gesture to àwọn èèyàn tó bá ṣe kínní. Ìyẹn ló bí ọ̀rọ̀ pé everywhere where you see labor being pulled together, there will always be food. The owner, ẹni tó ní nǹkan tí wọ́n ń ṣe nǹkan yẹn fún, he will provide food to entertain his mates or members of his guilds tí wọ́n contribute labor wọn láti complete the activity yẹn. So it's not, I don't want us to kind of think about it just in terms of aro or where. It's something that cuts across every labor or capital intensive activity of any individual. And you can think about it in terms of pé téèyàn bá fẹ́ ṣe nǹkan oríire, it's something that you can be used to measure your success as an individual, where you potentially could now meet capital strains. Other people will pull their resources, in this case their labor, together to help you overcome that particular hurdle and help you achieve that success. So there we go. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Awori Saxon. And in the coming days, we'll be visiting some materials to discuss bá a ṣe ń ṣe nígbà láéláé nílẹ̀ Yorùbá. Nǹkan tó bá a débi ọ̀rọ̀ yìí ni pé how were we able to maintain staying power even with 9% of the population in the Americas? That's how we got here. And we're saying that one of the major things that scholars have noticed, and these are not Yoruba scholars, these are Europeans who took time to observe these people and say, what is it that makes you guys so different? How come you're able to influence the African American culture, the Creoles, and all of that? Meanwhile, they're just a very small number of the slave population. And one of the things they said was the fact that they worked together. They would, connect, and individualism was very low. It was mostly about communalism. And that's how we got into Arepo, Omejo, Lonje Omejo, Niya Abilon, Onjeki Omenyo, Kokpa Omenyo, sorry, whatever. So we got we got into the arrow to say what I was talking about, how back in the day, the man call it one job con orule, dancing con orule, and to name a con bonjele, one job shepo, agbajowo la fin soya, ajejowo con barudori. And what that means basically is that we do more when we're united, and we're able to actually not just preserve something, but we're able to preserve it long enough to hand it over to another generation when we do things together. So again, some of these conversations will take us back to what we were, so that we don't lose those things, regardless of the fact that today we are being influenced by Western culture and all of those things, and they have their own good sides. But it's important not to lose yourself in the midst of the noise that we have to work through in our day. So thank you very much, Awori Saxon and PFA. Lion, you can go then. I'll go back to the material.
Okay, yeah. Everybody, thank you so much. Mo fẹ́ dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ gbogbo àwọn àtàdé sọ̀rọ̀ àbújá ọmọ ìyá Àwórì ọlọ́mọ ẹ ṣeun, God bless you, PFA. Mo jẹ́ ó rí i pé ọ̀rọ̀ tá à ń sọ ó jẹ́ kí àwọn understand pé the reason why táwọn European yẹn ṣe observe nǹkan báyìí nínú wa bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe sọ tẹ́lẹ̀ ni pé ó jẹ́ value tó yẹ pé a ti fi sínú ara wa ní gẹ́gẹ́ nínú culture wa kó tó di pé we were transported across the Atlantic. And nǹkan méjì ni, apart from labour, economy wa náà wà ń bẹ̀. Àmọ́ nǹkan tá à ń pè ní èsùsú àti ọfà ṣíṣe. Wọ́n ṣe èsùsú, nǹkan tá à ń pè ní cooperative lénìí, táwọn èèyàn pè ní cooperative society. It is an adaptation of èsùsú tí Yorùbá máa ń ṣe. Ìyẹn dẹ̀ ni pé a mọ importance nínú economic value. Ẹ mọ̀ tí àwọn èèyàn bá lọ ṣọ̀yà fún yàn ní oko, ẹni tó gbin nǹkan tó pọ̀ lọ́jà ntìrẹrẹ, àwọn èèyàn I believe in interflow of economic powers kó máa revolve within the community. Nígbà tí gbogbo àwọn èèyàn ẹni tó bá fẹ́ kanlé ẹ̀ successfully ó máa rí ibi gbé. Owó yẹn ò lọ síta, even though àfowó kan, some of those resources didn't go around. It revolves within the community, and it makes the community to grow faster and be much more stronger. Gbogbo nǹkan tí mo fẹ́ sọ ni àwọn tó kù ti fẹ́ sọ, bọ̀ nǹkan mo wò pé nǹkan tí ó kàn kù ni pé kí n jẹ́ kí ká mọ̀ wípé bá a ṣe ń ṣe ni is not that pé a copy. This is who we are. Yorùbá máa ń ṣẹ̀tanú ara wọn, ṣùgbọ́n kí ló dé tí Yorùbá ò fọ́nká pẹ̀lú ẹ̀tanú àti ìlara ni pé a ní nǹkan tó pọ̀ tá a jọ ń ṣe papọ̀, nǹkan tó so wá pọ̀ ó strong ju nǹkan tí ó lè tú wa ká lọ. So nǹkan tó fà tó pé a fi strong ni. Mo rántí orin kan tí bóyá bàbá Fálétí ló kọ ni àbí mi ò mọ ẹni tí ó máa ń kọrin. Mo ṣáà pé ńgbà tá à ń kékeré tá a bá jí akọrin wọn kọ́ ń pa igi ni. And and I think it's a resource to store up the names of igi. Wọ́n máa ní ṣe téyín bá ti ká ilé ẹ̀rín àwo, bí igi bá tán lóko ilẹ̀ yóò di sísá. Ẹja máa fura ká má sọgbó ní ńlá dàhóró. Àtọ̀tọ̀ ló ní ẹja àparò jẹ́ ẹja mójútó gbogbo tiwa tó jálùmọ́nì. Igi apántán lọ nígbó, igi ìrókò gan kò sínú igbó mọ́. Gbogbo igi olówó gegege láti ń gé sá lọ́nù oko wa. ọ̀gàn ó tá a fi ń tẹ̀pá ò sí mọ́ ẹ fura àṣálẹ̀ ń kànlẹ̀kùn gbọ̀ngbọ̀n ẹ jẹ́ á mójútó gbogbo igi rere tó ló fi kẹ́wàá igi náà la fi kan bùsùn igi náà la ìṣèrólé igi náà la fi kan mọ́tò la fi kàga bígi bá tóbi nínú igbó ilé ẹranko ní ńlá ni igi tó tóbi ló sì lè gbàyàn dúró tí bí oyin bí àná òfin ń tàtàn dànù nítorí igi la ṣe dáyàn gbọ́n nítorí ìdí mèrè la fi fàgbọ́n pa àlà nítorí gbogbo wa lèdùmàrè ṣe dági sílẹ̀ yìí tá a fi ń sàn fún wàrà tí fún oyin a jẹ́ wípé nítorí ọjọ́ iwájú ẹni tó bá gégi kó yá tún gbingi ẹ jẹ́ á kìlọ̀ fagégi lódò kó gbẹ̀gbìn pààrọ̀ so orin yẹn ó jẹ́ orin tí ewì ni ó jẹ́ ewì tó máa ń jí wa sílẹ̀ tó dẹ̀ jẹ́ ká mọ̀ pé igi jẹ́ nǹkan tó wà important èyí ló fi máa jẹ́ káwọn èèyàn rántí nǹkan ẹwà èdè Yorùbá ẹ ṣeun púpọ̀.
ẹ bá wa fún Mr. Laiwon látẹ̀wọ́ it's too much orí mi wú o ó yẹ kẹ́ ẹ bá wa kọ orin yẹn síbì kan ni o àbí ewì yẹn kẹ́ ẹ bá wa kọ. Olùkọ́ Bùsúyì, we can't hear you or maybe it's just me.
Oh, sorry. Mo ti ń sọ̀rọ̀, mo ti pàtẹ́wọ́ gan. Ṣé ẹ̀gbá tẹ́wọ́ tí mo pa? Wow, that was brilliant, Lion. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. And that's conservation, right? That's conservation. That's reforestation instead of deforestation. That's people talking about the possibility of desertification in one area. That's brilliant. Eshegon, thanks so much, Lion. Meanwhile, there's also something he said. He said, nítorí ìjímèrè la ṣe ń fi àgbọn pa àlà. Who understands what that is? Or maybe you can just talk about it. Torí ìjímèrè la ṣe ń fi àgbọn pa àlà.
Ìjímèrè is a type of ọ̀bọ.
Donkey.
Àgbọn with coconut. So torí ìjímèrè does not eat àgbọn or what? I don't know. All I know is that ìjímèrè is ọ̀bọ.
It's a height of trees. You know, àgbọn doesn't have branches.
Yes.
Àgbọn ò ní ẹ̀ka tí ìjímèrè lè máa fò bẹ́ mọ́. So kò ní lè bẹ́ mọ́ àgbọn tó ga. Tó bá ti dé òpin ẹ máa gbọ́ kápẹ́ nísìnyí ẹ̀ka ni ìjímèrè máa ń bẹ́ mọ́. Á bẹ́ mọ́ ẹ̀ka yìí láti branch ilé á bẹ́ sí branch igi mi. Àbí? Tó bá dé bí igi àgbọn kí bó ló fẹ́ fọwọ́ mú? It can't hold the trunk. You know, àgbọn back in the man Carlos King.
Isn't ìjímèrè gorilla?
But Lion, is ìjímèrè gorilla? I don't think so.
Iná kí ni gorilla? Ìjímèrè làwọn ọ̀bọ tí wọ́n máa ń jẹko, tí wọ́n máa ń ba oko jẹ́, tí wọ́n bá gbin gẹ́gẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe sọ tí wọ́n bá gbin àgbọn sí àlà. Wọn ò ní rí nǹkan fọwọ́ mú, so wọn fẹ́ stay nílé, wọn fẹ́ ń bọ́ sílé torí káwọn ọdẹ má bàa rí wọn mú. So tá a bá fẹ́ àgbọn pa àlà, wọn ò ní lè invade oko.
Exactly. Àti pé tó má ṣe tún fẹ́ àgbọn pa àlà yẹn gan náà gbogbo àwọn tó ń pẹ́ ń bẹ́ kiri àwọn kan pé àwọn ìṣàkóso kan máa ń sọ kíní kan pé ìjímèrè ṣọ́gigùn kó má bàa gungi aládìí. So ìjímèrè naturally máa ń gungi ní a máa bẹ́ kiri láti igi kan sí kejì. So tó bá ti wá débi bí igi àgbọn ò ní ẹ̀ka kò síbi tí ìjímèrè máa rí mú lára ẹ̀. So wọ́n fẹ́ pààlà ó bẹ́tà kan fi nǹkan tí ìjímèrè ò lè. Mo wá wò pé kí ni ìjímèrè fẹ́ ṣe pẹ̀lú àgbọn náà báwọn kò lè fọwọ́ kàn. So what would that really mean? Would it mean that he's not going to mix the whole place up? For instance, tó bá jẹ́ pé wọ́n lo igi eléso tó lè fọwọ́ ká, tó bá ká èso yẹn tó bá jábọ́, èso náà tún lè wù, and it becomes very difficult for people to recognize the boundary. You get? But if Ìjímèrè can hold branch, it can also hold trunk. No, ọwọ́ ò tóbi now. Abe, Oh, wait, Toby, how can he hold the trunk? No. Oh, well, Toby,
But
trunk.
it can work both ways as well, because for the farmer, when you see a row of agbon coconuts, you
You
understand
also
that
know.
wọ́n fi bíbá wọ́n fi kíní ṣe ààlà ni. Pé tó bá dẹ̀ ti jẹ́ pé wọ́n fi ṣe ààlà ni, it means that outside of that, bóyá igbó dídí tí èèyàn ò gbọ́dọ̀ wọ̀ láti lọ pẹran bẹ́ẹ̀ anyhow, or basically an area that we are conserving. So perhaps it could be both. I mean, I've never heard Oborio until today, so.
This is the first I don't know Agbo. This is the first I don't know Agbo, and it's actually quite interesting. Meanwhile, Abe, well done. Well done. Oyin tí bàbá sùwé bá gbá probably.
R.I.P. to Baba Suwe.
R.I.P. to him. Aṣáàrí kan sọ pẹ̀lú ọgbọ́n, ó máa tún òwe pa, á da ọgbọ́n ẹrù. Bàbá sùwé yẹn, èèyàn kan ni. But yeah, that's actually quite good. So let's go back to the book now. I like the way we're having this conversation because ó jẹ́ kí kan dúró sí pàǹkàwé and gbìyànjú àti mọ ẹ̀kọ́ tá a lè kọ́ nínú ìwé táǹkà. So mo fẹ́ dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ ẹ̀yin tí tẹ́ ń bá wa kálọ̀ àtẹ̀yin tẹ́ ń bá wa ṣàlàyé ẹ̀ tẹ́ ń bá wa yànnàná ọ̀rọ̀ náà. So let's go back to, so we're talking about what made the Yoruba people have that staying power, despite the fact that they were just 9%. Fast, please come back whenever you're ready. We'd like to hear your views. What made them do all of that, despite the fact that they were just 9% of the entire slave population in the Americas? And one of our brothers, Jay, said they were the third, and I was like, oh, it's actually possible. But even then, in comparison with the kind of influence they exerted in America, in the Americas, and in the Caribbean, the West Indies, and all of that. So some people have observed us. So there are two of them that observed us and wrote something about it. Esheo, Mr. Lekwakala. There are two things they observed. Sorry, two people observed us and wrote something about it. So the first one was David Eltis, and this is what he wrote. Within coerced African migration, that is, within coerced African migration, the Yoruba were among the latest to arrive, but were neither the most numerous nor the least scattered over the Americas. Reasonably precise estimates for other groups will eventually become available, but it is probable that Igbo and some West African peoples were larger and more concentrated than the Yoruba. In other words, kó wá sójú kan náà, wọ́n fọ́n wa ká. Àwọn sọ pé àwọn Igbo wọ́n pọ̀ jù wá lọ, wọ́n dẹ̀ tún wá fọ́n sí ojú kan náà. They are concentrated than the Yoruba. The Igbo in parts of the British Caribbean and some of what has been termed Congo groups in southeast Brazil. Yet, the impact of the Yoruba speakers on Creole societies that emerged in many parts of the Americas appears to modern scholars to have been strong. And in light of the evidence presented here, it is out their influence is out of proportion to the relative size of Yoruba arrivals. In other words, your influence is much more than what you should be having considering your number. And so one person now talked about why that may be so. His name is Louis Antoine, and he wrote this in 1858. And this is what he says. He said the Yoruba people were guided in marked degree by the sense of association. The principle of combination for the common weal has been fully sustained wherever they have settled in any numbers. In fact, the whole Yoruba race may be said to form a sort of social league for mutual support and protection. So this is what was observed in 1858. And why is this important? That we don't lose this. We don't lose this regardless of whatever it is that we're learning today. Regardless of what we're teaching our children, we're British, we're Americans, we're this, we're that, we're Yoruba. And you got to is because of the power of association. That there are certain things, there's an African proverb: if you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel far, travel together, like travel with people. You're able to go farther when you work with others. So, and also, that also reminds me of some of the things we'll be doing in the coming year as Redomi. We'll probably have another call during the week. But hi, how are you? How's Daddy? How's Daddy? Fine. He's upstairs. Okay, tell him I'm coming. Sorry, that's my nephew. Where is he back? Fine boy. Yeah. So we have some things we want to do at Radio Me, and it's going to require all of us to band together. For some of us, it will be our expertise. For some people, it will be their experience. For some others, it will be their connections. And from others, it could be the finance. But regardless of, I know that everybody, regardless of who you are or where you may be, everyone has something to bring to the table. And so all the things we say about our society, or want to do things in schools, in schools to educate people, the curriculum, agriculture, documentary, radio, all those things we've been talking about all the while. The way to do it is to work together. And at the end of the day, we'll be able to achieve our goals faster than if we were to do it, just by ourselves. Yesterday, we had a call on Telegram, and we're about 20 people. I heard that a lot of people don't know how to use Telegram. So I said I will talk about it again on TikTok, and then we'll find a way to schedule another call. Maybe for Saturday. But sorry, just remember the fact that if they were able to do it back then in the 19th century, in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, to the point where they were observed and written about, we can do much more in the 21st century. Let me keep reading. High five. Good boy. An additional explanation was the widespread cultural influence which the Yorùbá established over much of West Africa before and during the centuries of the slave trade. So he said he had a widespread cultural influence. And this is very important. So please, let's listen. We've already heard the thing about the association. This is another reason Yorùbá was able to, have that much influence. So already, Kotokoro in West Africa already had a widespread cultural influence. To the east and west of Yorùbá land, Yorùbá traditions and myths of origin and Yorùbá ideas of the importance of Ife early influenced the Edo and Aja. Right? As states and trade grew in these places, the Yorùbá language, as will be remembered, developed into a sort of common language, especially for commercial purposes. No doubt a product of widespread impact of Yorùbá trade. So what they are saying is that, and please, I'm going to say this slowly, because even me, I think it's a very, very serious stuff. So you know how we have different religions today, right? I'm a Christian. Some of us are Muslims. Some of us are Isheshe. But he's trying to say here that idea of what Yoruba is. Please understand what I'm about to say. Don't go religious on me. Like I always say, these conversations is less religious than cultural and philosophical. But the point is that the culture of the people had made them see Ife in a particular light based on their myth of origin. And because of that, everything revolved around Ife. So for centuries, they've been used to seeing Ife as this, sacred place, as this place, the cradle for all of them. Even those who were not essentially Yoruba, people like, who were not exactly Yoruba, people like the Edos, for instance, also looked up to Ife in that sense. Regardless of the nonsense being said on social media these days, this is, we're talking about when people were still normal, not when they started talking. But originally, so everybody looked up to Ife in that sense. Then number two, Yoruba was also the lingua franca among traders. People were buying and selling and speaking the language. So they had an element that united them back in the day. Tiwalola jọ tó bá ti dé jẹ́ ká mọ̀, so a máa lè padà sí Benin Republic. Ó tẹ̀ ní fídíò kan téèyàn kan fi ránṣẹ́ sí mi, so a máa lè sọ fídíò yẹn. Ẹni tó ń fẹ́ wá sókè ṣàrà fìyẹn lẹ̀ kó má bá rẹ̀ ṣeré nínú ìgboro tó wà.
Mr. Bushi.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick one. Here to lose train of thought. I was just sending you a message on what's it called? On Telegram.
Oh, okay.
I've been able to get the attention of Onimeko.
Wow.
So
wow.
We'll arrange time. In fact, he's willing to do it ASAP if possible, to give clarity and credence to all these things we're talking about, our brothers and sisters in Benin Republic and Yorubas in diaspora and whatever. In fact, I found out one other new information about Baba SBJ Oshofa. His father is not even from Benin Republic.
nǹkan tí mo sọ nìyẹn wọ́n lọ pé Yorùbá ni wọ́n wá lọ síbẹ̀
He's an
ibẹ̀ náà bí bàbá
woman.
sí.
He's an woman.
So that information was correct then.
Yeah.
But so, àwọn kan tó fọ́ nìyẹn òun bàbá gangan could claim Benin. Ẹ kì í sáré pé ọwọ́ ẹ sáré parí lẹ́rìn kan mò ń wo interview Túnjí ẹ mọ ọkùn Túnjí lánàá.
I've had the name.
Mo lọ sájò àwọn ọ̀rẹ́ mi jẹun wọ́n ní ìwà àbùtà ọ̀rọ̀ atakọ́ ló ń ṣe mí.
Suradi Taylor
ọkùn Túnjí Suradi Taylor yes. Mo wo interview wọn kan wọ́n bèèrè wọn pé ọmọ bo ni wọ́n ṣé àwọn kan tí bàbá sọ wọn pé bàbá àwọn sincerely mo ti gbàgbé ìlú tán ti wá bóyá jẹ́ bọ́ something pé ṣùgbọ́n Abẹ́òkúta náà bí gbogbo àwọn sí and therefore he is an Ẹ̀gbá man. And I've heard some elders àwọn tó ti wà bí 80s 90s mo ti rí àwọn méjì tó èèyàn kan náà wà tẹ́ pé Ifẹ̀ gangan ni bàbá wọn but Ìpẹ̀tù náà ń jẹ́ Ìpẹ̀tù náà ń claim torí pé ibẹ̀ náà ti dàgbà sí. So I think Yorùbá have that thing amongst ourselves. Àkànní jẹ́ kí bọ́kàn ìpá àwọn tó ń ṣe ara wọn they can't make that claim because culture wa ò yé wọn. I get what you're saying now. Ọ̀nà tí wọ́n jìn.
So yeah, Onímẹ̀kọ́ is on ground.
Wow.
So Asoro will plan that. I mean, I think he's looking as early as tomorrow, if we can.
Oh, we can absolutely. We're gonna have a king. We're gonna have a king on TikTok. We kill and say,
and I think I'm pushing the same thing to Professor Ashiwaju. Professor Ashiwaju is a border expert. I think he's probably the best in. So he's being a professor is in history and border matters. So I don't think it will be a joke. And Professor Ashiwaju is from Imeko as well. So yeah.
Ṣé àwọn ọgbẹ́ yẹn sọ̀rọ̀ lẹ́ẹ̀kan fídíò kan tá a play last time I play ẹni sùúrù tán jẹ́ Kúnlé.
Ok ẹni tó ń jẹ́ Kúnlé mọ́ rẹ̀ má worry a quick one ẹ kí n recap ṣé o lè ṣe Olúọ̀fìn Láàrò náà kó fi kún line yìí o mọ̀ pé nǹkan tó lè ṣe ni.
I should be able to pull that as well.
Gbìyànjú tibẹ̀ mo mọ̀ pé nǹkan tó lè ṣe ni o mọ̀ pé ẹni tó ń bá ẹ sọ̀rọ̀ náà ẹni tó mọ̀ pé tilétilé ẹ ni.
Ẹni tó tiẹ̀ porúkọ
tó bá lè ṣe
yẹn
wọ́n lè fi bẹ́ẹ̀ lẹ̀.
ẹ̀yin tẹ̀wọ̀n lórí TikTok ẹ lè jẹ́ kẹ́rù máa bà yàn ẹ mọ̀ yàn.
èèyàn tí mo
ṣé ṣeun ló sọ̀rọ̀ yẹn.
kò sí wàhálà.
mo ti mẹ́ tó sọ̀rọ̀.
gbójúkò mẹ́ jẹ́ ká ṣe Olúọ̀fìn Láàrò náà mọ̀. ṣe rí àwọn ọ̀tàn kan wà tó yẹ pé tá a bá fi múlẹ̀ ìtàn yẹn máa parẹ́ kó dẹ̀ máa parẹ́ láéláé. I've come to understand that people in their 60s now tó máa sọ àwọn ọ̀tàn kan I will always be almost shedding tears. Tẹ́yìn ò bá mọ̀ táwa náà mọ̀ àwọn tó ń bọ̀ ó di gbó ó lọ nìyẹn for life and they will come back to come and tell us what we know in their own favour and we become a vagabond in our own land. It's high time we come back to understanding history and real history. Ìtàn wà fún èèyàn tó wà máa sọ to suit themselves these days. That's one thing I've come to understand. Ọ̀rọ̀ bàbá Ọ̀ṣọ́fà tẹ́ ń sọ yẹn I can tell you the reason why it's like that but ọ̀rọ̀ ọjọ́ mi ni ẹ má yẹ kí n kó sí àárín púpọ̀ jù. So I must say thank you so much. You guys are doing well. I've been following for a couple of months and I've been waiting to see many things. I'm an underground observer. You have been doing well. It is well. Go dig back on.
Sure, thank you so much. I always say, and I think Nigeria babe knows what I'm about to say. I always ask him, when somebody came and said, let's just have this thing, we're talking to the masses. And I always said, nah. I always felt in my heart that we have a very, very educated, enlightened audience that we're speaking to every time we come online. And that I don't want to make that mistake of just talking at people and, telling them things without thinking it through. And so, and why am I saying this? I've known PFA for a while. I've known PFA since Clubhouse. I have my own circles in Clubhouse, but I know him. I used to attend the session sometimes. in Yoruba Palava. Fantastic, you know. But so seeing him on TikTok coming on here is actually a blessing. But to now know that we're going to have an Onimeko, I think it's, so if you ask me, Shea or Laia, tó bá pọ̀ ní single ni ó ti táwọn anything wọ́n mọ́tò kan lọ bá kábíyèsí kan máa wọ mọ́tò máa gbé mọ́tò máa drive débẹ̀. But I mean, I want to appreciate you first of all, PFA, for even doing that, because that way we can actually hear certain things. Tẹ́pà àmọ̀tẹ́lẹ̀, tẹ́pà àwọn bàbá yẹn. Pé má sọ fún àwọn èèyàn kan pé ṣẹ́rí mo ní àgbàlagbà kan wọ́n ti ṣàìsàn sí wọ́n ṣàìsàn lọ́dún yìí. Ṣùgbọ́n bí 20 ọdún sẹ́yìn ó tẹ̀lé 20 ọdún ìgbà tí mo wà ní school. Tí n bá lọ bá bàbá yẹn pé kán sọ àwọn ọ̀tàn torí èmi fi ń ṣiṣẹ́ níṣẹ́ school tèmi ni mo fi ń ṣiṣẹ́ school máa lọ bẹ̀ máa lọ gba ohun wọn sílẹ̀. Tá bá ti débì kan wá tún ní padà wá wọ́n á tún sọ̀rọ̀ díẹ̀ wọ́n á tún sọ̀rọ̀ wọ́n á tún débì kan wọ́n á tún máa kọ̀ọ̀kan jáde wọ́n á tún ní kí n padà wá. Nǹkan tí mo rí nínú àwọn bàbá yẹn ni pé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ wọn ní nǹkan tó fẹ́ sọ ṣùgbọ́n ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ọ̀dọ́ wọn ráyè láti farabalẹ̀ láti gbọ́ wọn. So anytime bá ti rí opportunity pé wọ́n fẹ́ wá bá wa sọ̀rọ̀, I'll advise that whatever you can do to be there, please do. We meet here. We have these live sessions every day, apart from Sundays, Monday to Saturday, 11 a.m. Ife time. So I go mọ́kànlá ọ̀la. Tí bàbá ní nígbà tí débi lágo mọ́kànlá ṣe ọgbẹ́ àwọn lè débi bí aago méjìlá so that láàrin aago mọ́kànlá sí méjìlá
I'm at to settle down.
Yeah. I'm at to settle down, exactly. So please, I really want to appreciate you, and I'm all up for it. I'm all up for it, and we can do it tomorrow. We'll start 11. We usually have this introductory chats and all of that. I've mentioned from wákàtí kan. Bàbá máa wọ́n lè bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí bá wọn sọ̀rọ̀ fún mi tó rọ̀ láti aago méjìlá. But we still have to talk about it before. Lẹ́yìn bíbí.
I saw
Telegram.
Yeah.
And then I also read about, I remember watching an interview of Professor Ashiwaju. I didn't know he was the one that you were talking about. So, but yeah, sorry, I went back to check, and that'll be a very big fish to that we can work with. Eshekon, thanks so much. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. I think débẹ̀ díẹ̀ ní ṣe pé a ti sọ̀rọ̀ kan pé a fẹ́ ṣe documentary kan lọ́dún tó ń bọ̀. Àwọn báyìí máa ṣe náà láti bẹ̀rẹ̀ yìí. TikTok may just be social media, but it's not just social media. It's a platform that could lead to many things. I want to appreciate everybody for your support, and hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to talk to Onimeko again. Imeko is known primarily today ní Àgbáyé as the base of Celestial Church of Christ, and but beyond that, it's an important part of Yoruba land. So to have a king, coming here to speak to us is a very, very, very great honor. And it would be nice to meet a lot of Ilaro too. Meanwhile, let me also say something. I think Ilaro's story is not being said as it should. When I was doing research on Egba and Daomi some time ago, and Ilaro was just appearing here and there. Ilaro, like, Ilaro kan, Olu Ilarogan is the paramount ruler of Yewa now. Shemogba PFA. Abanko. Imalo trying ara Yewa and Bio.
Exactly.
That's correct. 100%. That's correct. 100%.
So more in fact, mo lo Ilarogan, most of you I always ask mo lo Ilaro láìpẹ́ tí mo ra nǹkan tí Yayi ń ṣe àwọn kan. Of course, there's the political issue of Ogun State and everything. I was like, there's so much more that could come out of here. The story itself is not even being heard. What Ilaro also has a sizable population of people that returned from Brazil, because they also had a sizable people but in relation to Daume, Ilaro was just showing every time. But Gezo was trying to attack. Gezo was trying to attack. He routed Ilaro. Routed some parts. Then Ilaro was against them. I'm like, how come nobody talks so much about it? So if you can get to love Ilaro.
They sent a warrior. They sent Dustman, please correct me if I'm wrong. So the Oyomesis sent a warrior from Oyole to come and help them with the Daume invaders. And
that's correct. You're right. You're right.
Mwawa Deja. Some of the indigenes won't believe potency warrior yen Orona loruko warrior yen.
So Orona, there's a shrine. There is a shrine somewhere there. Yeah.
Only hero you are be should the cash be the sharp
ti Abẹ́òkúta ibẹ̀.
Exactly.
So òrónà yẹn ibi tó ní agbára dé ẹkùn ó mú ẹkùn lóòyẹ̀ níbi tó ti ń ṣọdẹ ẹkùn yẹn ló máa wá fi ń ṣọdẹ. So ó ní chain tó fi ń so ẹkùn yẹn níbi tí wọ́n sọ àwọn ọ̀tọ̀ yẹn fún wa dé wọ́n ní nígbà tó dé látọ̀yọ́ lé ó wá sọ fún wọn pé ibi tó ń wà yìí o ní quarters tó ń fi sí pé ibi tó ń wà yìí o tí àwọn tó wá invade wọn àwọn ará Dahomey tó wá ń kógun jà wọn tí wọn ò bá dé àwọn aráàlú ò gbọ́dọ̀ pé òun jáde o.
Maybe I should take it. Maybe let me take over from you. I can see you're a bit struggling there. Okay, the issue was this. He happens to be a warrior who, in the history we had, was the one that Toteluyedo, right? He happened to be a warrior, a hunter, and a very strong man. So eventually, during many of the times that he used to barricade those walls from coming in. So that's more reason that there is no way Thomas first saw to pay Laromo. Then if I pay Laroko ma pay Jono, he look on what on pay Jono.
Oh yeah.
So Tabatin saw stories in and Tamama saw Itoyeno Amawa Padasi Benin Republic. So we started all of those things, but we only interconnection there and around. So eventually when that man wanted to die, he told them that anytime there is any war,
Just man.
You know what I know. You know what I know. Boni eni, to ba po boni eni. No so boni ko boni ba sọ̀rọ̀ nbi. Kan lè mọ̀ pé Anitan and the Nasha and ibi that imbo and Shomo àtọ̀hún rìn wá. You understand? Our story stands everywhere and just that we are scattered everywhere in the world as well.
Mr. Butui,
thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Just an addition for the audience. I want to